Sometimes you just don't want to read a chunk of a fantasy book, but you want a satisfying short story. For today's video, I will be recommending to you short fantasy stories under 250 pages that make a whole story. So hi and welcome back, my fellow fantasy book lovers, or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy and I'm a fantasy book lover from Belgium. For today's video, I want to recommend you my personal favorite short fantasy books. These are a mix of high fantasy and epic fantasy, as well as urban fantasy and romantasy. So I hope in this list there is a little bit of something for each of you. The first book series that I'm grabbing is a romantasy series. It is called That Time I Got Drunk And. So this is the Mead Mishaps series by Kimberly Lemming. The first book is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. That book was 240 pages if I'm not mistaken. This one is book number 2. We follow a different main character and side character in each book. And in this one is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. So the main character, female main character that we're following, is a girl of a darker skin tone. She's the best friend of the girl of book number 1 and she gets involved with a werewolf. So that's the basic setup of these books. They are romantasy books and they do have a fair bit of smut. So if that's what you're looking for, these are very quick and easy reads. And this particular book is only 204 pages. So I personally sometimes one-shot these, as in I start them in the early evening and then I finish them whenever I'm actually in bed. So yeah, I read these in a few hours and I really do enjoy them. Then we go to something completely different. This is the Fireborn Blade. This is high fantasy, epic fantasy. In this book we follow a female knight who is struggling with her title because she was getting married to someone that the marriage blew off and it's like a bad thing for her title. So in order to reclaim her title, she needs to go and slay a dragon. This book is very short, but it does still tell an entire story because of the way how it's written. So most chapters follow the main story of the knight going into the cave and trying to slay this dragon, but some of the other chapters are from the past, and some of the other parts are actually parts of dragon slaying books. So it's like retellings of what has happened in the past and different dragon types, etc. So I personally feel with how little pages this book has, it really does tell a complete story. I think it's 160 something pages, under 170 that I'm sure. And there will actually soon be a book 2 to this as well. I'm not sure if I'm gonna quickly get it and read it or not, because these are full price, like a thicker book. And that's a really big shame because they're like half of it, but they are hardcover, so I do and I don't get it. Nonetheless, a really good book. If you're into female knights and dragon slaying, then this is all up your alley. Again, it has mages as well, it has other knights as well. I feel like this is true medieval epic fantasy. Staying in the non-romantasy books, there is When Among Crows. This book is only 166 pages and I got this beautiful hardcover with the yellow edge. In this book we follow our main character who is a monster hunter. That's all I'm gonna tell about him. And he decides to get a plant to help save another creature, a witch more or less. So in this book we have a nowadays world in the United States, more or less, and then you have a world parallel to it that we normal humans cannot see until we interact with it, and they of course are creatures that are supernatural and living amongst us. So you get to see like transforming houses, etc. I think this is a really cool book, and without telling too much, is that it is a lot deeper than I first thought it would be. And I think the way that they made the entire story in so little pages, it was absolutely worth every single one of them. And I cannot recommend this book enough. This is one of those books that I will recommend anyone who wants to try to read fantasy but isn't sure if they will like it yet. So this to me is like one of the best ones of this list. After that, we have a Kingfisher book. Most of their books are actually quite short. This one is called Thornhegde and it comes in at only 111 pages of actually written text. You can see how thin it is, and this is a hardcover book. Now in Thornhegde, we follow the story of Sleeping Beauty, kind of, but what if the creature in the tower wasn't actually a princess needing to be saved? That is the alternate like fairy tale that we follow and discover in this book, and the creature that we follow is called Toadling, so she's like a toad basically, and she tries to protect this tower and make sure no one goes into the tower to save whatever is in it. I personally really love different takes on fairy tales, and especially if it's done in a fair number of pages, because we all know the original story, but we maybe don't know like a different take on that story. But I also don't need a full 500-page book on it. So I feel for a short fantasy book that this really fulfilled what I hoped for it. Up next, I have two more romantasy reads that are rather short, but that still are dark and fairy tale-like. They are the fairy tale retellings by Scarlett St Clair. There's 2 out of 7 books out already. The first one I own a physical copy of is Mountains Made of Glass, and the second one is called Apples Dipped in Gold. In this, we follow a fairy realm where there's 7 princes, and in each book we follow a different prince. However, they are mainly written from the perspective of the human girl from one of the villages that they're around who encounters them. So in Mountains Made of Glass, the main character Gisela lives in a village where there is a lot of curses happening. It's been going on forever, and every single time there is a curse, someone has to solve the curse and go in kind of as a sacrifice, doing a seemingly impossible task to help the village. The well, or one of the wells of the village, is contaminated, is not working anymore, there's no more water coming out of it, and in the well is a frog. So Gisela is tasked with removing said frog. She goes into the well, removes the frog, and then she accidentally kills it, setting off another curse upon her, where she is claimed by one of these fae princes. And that's all I want to say about book 1. In book 2, we have another girl. She is actually working for her brothers. Her brothers are very abusive to her. She doesn't have any other family. One day, she's actually so fed up with everything that she goes to the edge of the woods to a ravine to jump into it. However, she is discovered by someone who wants her hand in marriage, who wants to save her from her situation, and who is willing to pay her family, or like her brothers, a wedding dowry for it. So the brothers agree that they will receive a big dowry for their sister and that she can be like picked up the next day. So the next day they come and pick her up. However, an ambush happens, and that's when you actually get into the bigger part of the story. I really love this. Do know that these are romantasy books, that there is a heavy romance underlined in these books, and that it is dark fantasy. Not everything is always fair in these books either, and there is a very strong undertone of all of these fairy tales that you may or may not know. At the end of each book you also get a big list of references. I personally don't really look at it, but it tells you all of the different fairy tales that it actually pulls inspiration from. And then the final book on my list is 6 Scorched Roses. At only 195 pages, this is one of my favorite vampire romantasy read, and that is really saying a lot because I love vampire books. But this book somehow, it tells a full story, leaving you wanting more, but also having a good ending to it, that for me this was worth every single page. And if after reading this book you fall in love with the world building, know that there's 3 other books already out, and a 4th and a 5th being written as we speak in the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent. So you have Serpent and the Wings of Night, Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, they're Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, and then 2 other books that will be releasing as a new duet very, very soon. Now in 6 Scorched Roses, we follow the main character, who is called Lilith. She's a human girl living in a village that was cursed X amount of years ago, not super long ago. However, the curse makes it that the village has people falling ill and crops not growing the way they should. So she's actively trying to save her sister who has this illness and finding the cure. She's actually a very smart girl. She has been working on a cure. However, there's an element that she thinks might be the solution, and it is vampire blood. So chance has it that there is exactly 1 vampire in their proximity, and she goes to this vampire to offer him 6 roses in exchange for 6 vials of blood. And that is the basic premises of this book. Of course, there's more that starts going on between the 2 of them, and I absolutely loved it. I think this is a beautiful book. I read it in one sitting and it was well worth it. So these are my personal short fantasy story recommendations. I know there's a lot more romantasy books in this genre than there is of other books, and the main reason is because if you want to do a very good part of world building, especially in epic fantasy and in high fantasy, you need a little bit more volume to your books in order to set the scene, give the basis of the magical system, and to have your reader understand what is going on. So that's the main reason that I believe that most of the books that I feel do well in short stories either have jumping timelines, like the Fireborn Blade, or are romantasy books that have an element of fantasy romance in a more urban or normal setting. I of course know that there's a lot more fantasy books out there that are short, so if you have other recommendations for me under 250 pages, feel free to let me know in a comment down below. As for usual, all of the books that I've mentioned will be listed in the description box with direct links for you to check them out. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and I would love to have you for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye!